Okay, we have to go deeper, don't we? Because how many times have we heard that it's all one and, meditate and set yourself free and become chilled and all these things. And, it's all great advice at the end of the day, but just by listening to these things, we cannot make them manifest. We have actually to do it. And that's the thing. And so how many of you have started to meditate, failed, or were moderately successful, but then stopped for whatever reasons? How many of you have the good intention to pick up books and to consider that you need to broaden your horizons with more subject matter, and then you get a third of the way through one or two books and then you stop? How many of you think that you are going to be setting off on some sort of a journey with a destination in mind, and then get sidetracked, distracted along the way? Probably all of you, the vast majority of you. So when we look at what we're actually speaking about here, people, we're speaking about the journey of the dark night of the soul. We're speaking about the hero's journey. We're speaking about a spiritual journey. We're speaking about the waking up journey. We're speaking about journeys. And these journeys are lifelong. And that's the failing with the vast majority of people. They don't expect these journeys to be lifelong. They don't expect to be able to have to do these or participate in these journeys, to get up every single morning with your staff and knapsack to continue on the journey. People think that if they read The Secret, or if they read some other book or watch a few videos, then their world should be transforming. But it doesn't work like that, does it? And then one of the greatest misconceptions is that life should be easy. Who told you it should be easy? Is there anybody out there that's ever told you that life should be easy? Life is not intended to be easy. Life is what it is. Whether there is an actual intention behind it all, well, that's anyone's guess. But what I've discerned from the vicissitudes of this life I have lived is that the compromises that I have had have all been exceedingly valuable and powerful, and have led to me being stronger, wiser, more informed, more determined, more knowledgeable, more human, more compassionate, more everything. They just give you more. If you don't have these experiences, then it stands to reason that you have less, doesn't it? People that have these, paths paved for them, born with a silver spoon in their mouth, and maybe get lucky and become actors or pop stars at a very young age, they all end up in disaster. Why? Because they haven't earned that journey. They are flung to one of the highest vantages on that mountain, and they haven't earned the journey, invariably. If we come upon actors and movie stars and successful people who have climbed and failed, climbed and failed, climbed and failed, and then they get up closer and closer, closer, and then ultimately they get somewhere up there, they've earned that, and they are much more stable, aren't they? And so we can look around and we can see more stable pop stars and actors and people like that, and then when we read about them, we'll understand why. And one of these examples is Anthony Hopkins. If you listen to Anthony Hopkins, I think at some stage I read his biography many years ago, and he's a philosophical, spiritual, intellectual, and he talks about all this stuff. Nobody said it was going to be easy, and it shouldn't be easy. And if you want it to be easy, then it's because You don't have whatever it takes to achieve all these wonderful things in this life. And this time around you won't. And so therefore you'll feel hard done to, you'll feel compromised, you'll feel victimised, you'll feel sad and, you know, anxious and bitter and all these things. And then you'll blame everybody else when you've done that to yourselves. And this is the crux of this video, people. This is what I'm going to be speaking about. How we do everything to ourselves and how it is all us. And so let's just take some, you know, very, very rudimentary, obvious examples. Now, if we look at our lives and we say to ourselves, I'm not happy with my job, it pays shit, and I can't fly around the world on a private jet and take all these wonderful holidays and, you know, have all these amazing relationships with these perfect people. What went wrong in my life? Well, let's have a look at your life then. Let's go back. How were you at school? I didn't like school. I was never there. Well, what about college? Nah, I didn't go to college. Well, already we're starting to see something, aren't we? I mean, you don't have to have a college degree, and I think these days they don't account for very much in any case, but in the old days they did. If you had a PhD in the old days, then it was worth something. I suppose to a lesser degree, you know, PhDs still do mean something. Degrees, they don't mean anything, do they? You have a degree in this and the other, what does it mean? It's just a stepping stone. And so if you've stepped upon that stone, then okay. Well, next is an internment. Next is, you know, a 7-year apprenticeship at a company in a business, something like that. And if we find ourselves that we're not happy with our job or what we're being paid and our life, which revolves around the job, then that's nothing to do with the world. That's to do with you. And you could say, yeah, well, they've not got this and they've not got that and they expect me to do this and they want me to do that and it's not right and, you know, this is a prison planet and we're all slaves. Well, I speak from a different perspective and vantage. When I was young, I wasn't keen on school. I never listened. I thought it was all bullshit and so elementary, and there's much more things that I was interested in. And so, albeit I wasn't one of these people given to truancy, because I respected my father's wish that I keep things simple for the family. At that stage, we had a large family, you know, 11 brothers and sisters, and so we all brought the cops to the house at some stage, you know, and I was expelled from all the schools I ever went to. But it wasn't through truancy. I actually did go there, and I was interested in one of the classes, and that was geology, geography. Countries and cultures and things like that, and I showed the greatest interest in that from an early age, and I got good marks. Everything else I flunked in. And so I left school at the earliest opportunity as soon as I was 16, and I went to work for my old man. And my old man was an entrepreneur, and he was an anti-government and anti-society. He was about doing things his own way. And he was very successful at what he did, and so I followed in his footsteps and I became an entrepreneur, and I did things my way. I never worked for anybody, and even if I did actually take employment via a company, I never considered myself to be employed. I was still self-employed. I am offering my service to this company. You don't have governance over me, and you're not telling me when to eat and when to drink, and, you know, within reason when to come and when to go. I'm going to do that. And so that's what I did. But if we have a job that we're not happy with, people, then we have to learn some of the skills then, don't we? And then we choose the job we want. And if, like me, there was no jobs out there that I was remotely interested in, then I created my own. I'm like, well, what can I do by way of running my own business? And so I started as an entrepreneur from about 12 years old, collecting scrap metal and hunting golf balls and poaching trout out of the local reservoir and all these sort of little things which are entrepreneurial, and odd jobbing and building go-karts and refurbishing push bikes and selling them to my mates, and I was there from a very young age. And so I've created my reality, and anything that's ever befallen me that I've never been happy with, I can't ever blame anybody else, and it's never in my nature to blame anybody else. And there was an occasion, one of my building projects, that I entered a contract with a company which stole £22,000 from me. And it was my fault because I shouldn't have done it. I should have been there, I should have overseen it, and I should have been on site every single day, but I didn't want to. I thought I'd just pay somebody in another country to complete my building, and I would stay in my apartment reading, meditating, and playing my guitar. Well, it didn't work quite how I wanted it to or hoped it would, because why, the cat's away, the mice will play. And when I went 2 months after to see the state of my house, it was exactly the same as it was when I gave them the £22 to do the refurbishment. And so, you know, we learn. And then the agent who sold me the house, you know, who introduced me to this builder, was expecting me to blame her, and I said, I don't blame you, of course, it's my decision, and it wouldn't have happened if I was here. And she says, you know, I admire that about you, because everybody else I've ever met, they always want to blame somebody else. And I was, you know, very readily expecting you to blame me, and I was feeling, partly responsible, because I did actually, you know, introduce this builder to you, but I didn't know anything about him. You know, I just knew he was a local builder, and I've heard of him, and, you know, so I looked up his number. And so, if we look at our relationships, and we're in relationships, and we're not happy, we've got to delve deep, people. We've got to go, why aren't we happy? Is it that I'm just not a happy person? Is it that I expect too much? Is it that, you know, I have like a princess syndrome or, you know, king syndrome, and I want my partner to revolve around me and worship me and all these sort of things? There's so much that goes into it. And so we really have to know thyself, and we have to assess ourselves, and we have to know about human psychology. If we don't know about human psychology, you know, we go through this life at our own peril. And this is why Plato, in his Republic, he states that all leaders, all kings, should be kings and philosophers, because they have to have the greatest of education and broadest of thinking ability if they're going to rule the people. And so I think that in school, psychology should be compulsory, because we have to know who we are and what other people are, and how we work as a species and as a creature. But we don't, you see, we're blind. All they tell us is all what they want us to know. They want to roboticize us, and they want us to get this certificate so then they can place us in one of their corporate extortion machines. And those that fall into that trap and then one day discover that they're not happy, well, it's because you've been fooled. And you can't blame them. They just took advantage of a bunch of immature, naive, open slates. You know, they were ready and available there to write upon your slate. And that's what the powers that be have done. They own all the educational institutions. They own everything. And they are moulding and manipulating the masses exactly how they want them to perform their tasks. Anybody outside of that is, you know, a bad machine. And people will go, they're mad, they are. Because they're not conforming, and they're not doing everything which you're supposed to do when you come off the production line. And then anybody that's operating as a free radical is a scary person, a person not to be trusted, a very threatening person. And people get jealous and envious and hateful towards these people, because deep down maybe they would like to escape the machine and their indoctrination and hypnosis, but they don't have the mettle for it. And it's too late now because they're too far gone, and all these things. And so all that's left is resentment and bitterness. Let's have a look at another situation where you live. many times in my life. This is why I've travelled so prolifically, because when I was growing up as a lad, I worshipped the sun, and I still do. I'm very pagan, I'm very Akhenaten. The sun is my god, and it gives life and it brings joy, and it's just absolutely incredible and amazing. And so I wanted to be close to the sun. I wanted to have a relationship with the sun every day of my life. I didn't just want to have a relationship, you know, for a couple of hours between the clouds here and there, maybe one fine summer's day. And so what I did is I decided then that I would go to a country where we do have blue skies and the sun is out every day. And so that's what I did. You know, travelling around the world to Canada and Australia and all those sorts of places. And then I thought, well, you know, I like, you know, beautiful golden sandy beaches and warm water. They can't get that in this country. The water's always freezing. It's not that clear and blue, and the beaches predominantly are stony and spiky. So I look at the world and I go, well, where can I get that? And then I go and get it. And so, you know, we can't say, yeah, well, my mum needs me, or, you know, I've got family and I've got kids. Well, you know, if you've got family and kids, then take your family and kids. And if it comes to the time in your life whereby your husband and partner doesn't want to go, then, okay, so you've made your bed, now you've got to lie in it until the kids are of an age, and then you have a choice, don't you? Yeah, well, I can't leave my... Oh, well, okay, then you carry your own cross. But don't be blaming anybody else. Don't be blaming anybody else for your conscience, for your guilt, for the attachment that you have. You know, there's certain things, certain humanisms which are inescapable. And, you know, what do you do with aging parents which need looking after? Well, you know, you could just wash your hands of that situation, and then the council will ultimately have to be... will drag them into a home, and then your parents are going to feel like, all my life I brought that, you know, kid up and he's abandoned me and he's thrown me in this home, or a terrible person. So nobody wants to live with that guilt, conscience on their shoulders, do they? So, you know, we're bound emotionally in lots of respects, and what I've done in my life, I've tried to eliminate the emotional bounds as much as I possibly can, because I don't like being emotionally bound. It's not healthy. And so one of the ways in which I've done that is to sever any partner over this last 14 years. I've always found partners to be emotionally stifling, very demanding, compromising. I could never be free, and I just didn't want to carry that ball and chain and have that burden. And I didn't value the relationship enough to sacrifice all the things that I wanted to do in my life. And so I became free. Lots of you won't be able to be free. You can't be free. You're too lonely, you're too insecure. You need stability. You need somebody else as a sidekick, as a partner to, you know, go through this life with. And, you know, when I see old couples and they've been together 40, 50 years, I find that absolutely incredible, unimaginable. And all I can think of is they've made some serious, heavy compromises in their lives just to have that person there. That, you know, do you want fish and chips tonight, pet, or shall we have egg and chips? And it's like, well, have we got any eggs? Oh, I'll have a look. Oh, no, we haven't. Don't worry, pet, I'll go and get them. And so everything's kind of like some pathetic partnership where nobody can cook a fucking meal on their own, nobody can do the shopping on their own, nobody can pay the bills on their own, and nobody can do anything on their own. Nobody can make any decisions. It's always like decisions between two fucking budgies. And, you know, if you are, you know, identical, then all right, fair enough. If one is a weaker one, the other one's a dominant one, and then the weaker one always succumbs, then okay, then that fits as well. And you'll find that this is what it's like, people. But if you've got strong independent people, then invariably that doesn't work. And then you'll probably go, oh, I know some strong independent people, they live their own lives, and it's out of respect and love, and yeah, 1 in a billion people. And so, you know, practical advice is don't blame anybody. Don't have a victim mentality. Take on board all of the vicissitudes of life and embrace them when you encounter them. Don't ever shy away from confronting difficulty, trauma, evil, compromise. All these things, they're all coming at you in your life, and if you fail and exhibit weakness and cowardice whenever this happens, then you carry the weight of that, and that will burden you for the rest of your life, because you will know that you're a coward. As much as you try to avoid it and hide that shadow part of your psyche, it will always be there and it will always haunt you. And deep down you'll know you're a coward, and you will either overtly admire people who aren't cowards, or you'll deeply resent them. And so what brought this about? You brought it about, nobody else, you. And if you are of a weak, shrinking violet disposition, then you have to know that you are never going to be a hero. You weren't born to be a hero. And so don't be blaming your parents, don't be blaming their DNA, don't be blaming your childhood. Just accept what you are, and look at the hand that you've been given, and then see what you can make of that. And when people are born, exceedingly ugly and fat and thin and, excessively this or excessively that, like freaks, well, when people are born exceptionally tall and they're laughed at, by their friends when they was at school, well, if they become good at baseball, they'll have the last laugh, won't they? Sorry, not baseball, basketball. They'll have the last laugh when they're earning, $10 trillion a year for throwing a fucking ball around. If someone's short and stocky, 4 foot fuck all, then I don't know, getting some Olympic weight training, because if you are an Olympic weight trainer, then gravity is on your side, because you've got much less distance to lift these weights. If you are 6'6", you've got all this distance to lift this weight. If you're 4'4", you've got half the fucking distance to travel, haven't you? And that makes a lot of difference, people. And so we look at, what our attributes are, and if we use our heads, then we'll work with those instead of allowing them to work against us, allowing other people to call us shorty all of our lives and to feel inadequate and this, that and the other. Find a job where short people are in demand. I suppose in the Vietnam War that would have been a good opportunity, because in Vietnam they had about 150 miles of these underground tunnels which the Viet Cong built, and there's a certain sector of the American armed forces which needed these tunnel rats to climb down and go inside these labyrinths of tunnels, which is very, very dangerous, because lots of them were trapped and booby trapped with bombs and this, that and the other. And you got to have balls about you. But the smaller men were hired for that job because the Viet Cong was small, and so some people became heroes in that realm. And so we just got to find, we've got to self-discover, people. We've got to look at our attributes, whether they're physical or mental, and then put them to task. And don't take any prisoners along the way, and don't feel a victim along the way. And every obstacle that is placed in front of you, consider it an arrow to your quiver, because when you've conquered that obstacle, then you're going to have more arrows in your quiver to battle on forward with more enemies, and ultimately you will become a hero, because when you travel on the hero's journey, there's only one outcome if you succeed, and that's you become a hero, and that's why it's called the hero's journey. But if you fail, what sort of journey is that? It's the coward's journey. Who speaks about the coward's journey? Who writes books about the coward's journey? Nobody wants to write about that, do they? So why would you want to be one of those? Let me just give you a couple more scenarios before we wrap this one up, people. When we look at this is all one, and we're God, and we can create our own reality and this, that and the other, well, first and foremost, we have to start here. We have to start thinking and planning, plotting what we want to do with our lives. Then we have to build upon the plan and the plot. and then we have to put it into practice, and then we have to put our energy and the belief behind it, and then we have to put our blood and sweat into it. Already we've lost 90% of the people that would even dare to set out on this journey. They've failed, haven't they? They've failed so many obstacles. This is why small businesses invariably they never succeed, because it's the character that is failing. It's not necessarily the business plan, it's the character. They just couldn't, find the staying power. When I started my business in the early days, it was my life. For many, many years, it was my life. And I worked, 16-hour days regularly. And through thick and thin, I had my old man coming round to me in downturns and telling me that it's not fucking working, is it? Fucking give it up, and this, that, and the other. And I said, look, we're in an economic crash at this moment in time. All businesses are down. And if I give up, then, I've lost everything I've worked for so far. But if I stay with it, then this downturn ain't going to last forever. And so I stuck with it. And then, I remember one occasion, this was the removals business I was starting. In the early days, I started with one old van, then I got 2 vans, and then I got a lorry and a couple of vans. And in the end, I had a huge warehouse with 6 lorries and 20 staff and all this sort of thing. And he'd come round from time to time for a cup of coffee, and he never, ever, ever once said, "You've done well. You stuck with it, son." No. Wouldn't dare, because that would have then reflected upon his poor advice as a father, and that would never do. And you see, what we learn about parents is very often they hate it when you usurp them, when you achieve more than they did, when you go it alone, and when you prove them wrong, and when you don't take their advice and then you succeed. They'll resent that. And then you'll encounter your own parents who are in some respects enemies to you, because you can see throughout the past then that they've really tried to scuttle your endeavour by giving you bad advice, by telling you to give up. What parent tells anyone to give up? And that wasn't in his character. He never gave up. Why did he want me to give up? Didn't want me usurping him. It's bizarre, but that's how it works, people. And when you read about human psychology, people's experiences with parents, you come upon this time and time again. And so, one more scenario to keep it simple, as to how you can achieve, if you've got the metal, if you've got the criteria, if you've got the design, if you've got everything that it takes. The vast majority of people don't. And so what I say to people, harshly, they may consider it, I'm taking the wind out their sail or pissing on their parade or whatever, but you got to look at the character, and you got to say, well, what have you done? What track record have you got? Where have you won anything? Where have you fought and fought and fought, with the eye of the tiger, in the face of all adversity? Where have you done this? Where have you proven yourself? And if you've never done it, well, you've got no track record. And what you're doing now doesn't look like it's, very auspicious, to be fair. But, still try until you end up proving yourself, proving to yourself that you're not cut out for it. And then change directions. And if we want to go onto YouTube and put in inspirational talks, and then we'll get all the Will Smith and Mike Tyson and all this, and they'll tell you what it takes. And what are these people? The 1 in a million. And so when I tell you about how I've done it, I've travelled to hell and back. Too many times to remember, people. Travelled around the world and done a million things, learned an enormous amount and read thousands of books and learned a thing or two. And none of my friends have done what I've done. None of my family have come remotely close. I was the only one that travelled. None of my family travelled outside of a package tour. I've always done it on my own. I've just gone to other nations. to Australia, to Africa, to America, Indonesia, everywhere. Go on my own. Set up businesses. Make something of my life. And I've been successful. All over the world. But I've had many failed expeditions, but they've never been that big to cripple me. I've had irons in the fire because I've never been stupid enough to invest in one source of income, you know? So it's imperative that you keep irons in fire. And that's why these multi-trillionaires, they're successful because they spread their money over the whole world in all different sorts of businesses and resources. And then when there's a downfall for this, well, there's a rise in that. And when there's a fall in that, there's a rise in this. So what they do is, it's like they back everything on the stock exchange. And, you know, they're never going to lose. Because the stock exchange has to be in existence, otherwise the whole Western world collapses. And you know, if you have a Western world collapse like Wall Street, then most people lost in those scenarios, but not everybody. Again, the you-know-whos, the bankers and the people that invested in everything. It's like, you know, the story, I'll finish up with this one, the story of the you-know-whos, the Rothschilds' involvement with the Battle of Waterloo between the Duke of Wellington and Napoleon, 1815. The you-know-who, the Rothschild, which was in charge of the banking in Britain. You see, Rothschild father at some stage, he had 5 sons and he distributed them, one to France, one to Germany, one to England, one to fucking Switzerland or fucking somewhere like that. So to take over those countries in the banking. And the one in Britain, because of the Napoleonic War, if Wellington lost, then Britain would fall into poverty and dejection and, you know, all those sorts of things. If Britain won, then of course we are the victors and we've got power over France and we can conquer their resources and, you know, all that sort of thing. And so it all hung on, the economy hung on who won that battle. And so the Rothschild sent somebody over to watch the battle, to actually see it with his eyes and to have a bunch of homing pigeons. And as soon as he determined the outcome, he would send that message back to Lord Rothschild. Rothschild would find out who'd won that battle at least 24 hours before a horseman could come running back and give the message to the king who'd won the battle, you see. So Rothschild had 24 hours advance notice of who won. Unfortunately, we won, but what he did, he acted as if we'd lost, and he started a panic with the shares, selling all the shares. And so all the bankers around him thought Rothschild knows something more than we do, and because he's a fucking top knob in this banking business, we're going to follow suit. So they all followed suit and they all sold their shares. And then when everybody sold their shares, maybe in 12 hours, the next 12 hours he spent buying them all back up for a penny on the dollar. And then he bought them all back for a fraction of their price. And then when the message came back and it said that Wellington had won, all those bankers realised they'd been scammed. That's when then the Rothschild took over the Bank of England. Rothschild then, from that point forward, owned the Bank of England. This is how it works, people. And so, you know, knowledge, self-belief, being smart, there's lots that goes into it. You see, with all this stuff, you can talk and talk and talk and talk and try and impress and trying to give people this information, but it just simply doesn't depend on that. You can have all the knowledge how this stuff works, but if you've got no practical experience, you'll never know. That's true knowledge. The experience is true knowledge. That's the only true knowledge, people. What you know, subjectively, personally. Because anybody else's knowledge, experience, is just hearsay to you. It means nothing to you. And so you have to build your knowledge, and you have to assess your knowledge, and like you have to treat yourself like a business. You look at your assets, you look at all of the varying arms of the business. You know, whether it's transport, whether it's packaging, whether it's processing, whatever it is, you've got to look at all these, you've got to monitor them all the time, and you've got to keep constant hands-on of morphing this into something else, and closing that down, and extending this, and pioneering into that. You've got to keep fingers on the button, you know, all the time. You just got to do that, and if you're not prepared to do that, then you won't succeed. But as an alternative to that then, all that getting involved in that to emancipate yourself in that fashion, then you can just step outside of it. You can just go, I'm done. I don't need any of that. And you look at the alternative, and you look at the alternatives. And it's like, you know, what I did with the weather, you know, then I would move to a country where the weather suited me. And if I didn't like the culture, I'd move to a culture where that suited me. If I didn't like the finances of a country or whatever, I'd move. And this is why I've travelled around, you know, 45 countries, experienced all different sorts of things, you know, working in the gold mines, working in an Aboriginal settlement, working for a millionaire on charter yachts, and, you know, just doing all different, when I say working, you know, that was in the early days, you know. I suppose before 30 years old. Before 30 years old, I'd go and take the odd position here and there, like working in the gold mines in Australia. Couldn't even call it working in actual fact. I mean, but that's another story. But a great experience. There is no one thing to leave you with. There is no one answer. Now, David Icke wrote about the answer. Well, that book was that thick, and that was about his 18th book. So if you put all those books together, there's probably here to the wall thickness of information, knowledge that you've got to learn. But that's only, you know, superficial knowledge. You need the experience, and by the time you've had the experience, then you put the knowledge together. And to be able to do this, you know, you need years under your belt, really, unless you know, you're super lucky or super genius and you create your own path. But you know, if you want to just step outside of it like a monk, and I think, you know, that's why they do this. They don't want the competition, they don't want all the stress and strains. Why would they? Because they don't want the trinkets at the end of the day, because they realise that they're not worth anything. What's worth something is your health, is your peace of mind, is your fitness, time to observe the world and contemplate, and educate yourself. And, you know, just like what I've been doing the last 14 years, spending my time in nature and exercising and educating myself, and, you know, spreading the knowledge, passing the baton, just trying to pass it forward, really. It's not a labour to me, it's so simple. I've been gifted with a certain level of articulation, and I can draw on things, you know, from my vast reservoir of knowledge and experience, that I can just speak endlessly. So it's simple for me, and so I'm obliged to do it. It's the decent thing to do. You know, I've often queried people when they know quite a lot of stuff, why they don't share it. Lots of people don't share it, you know, people. How many people have told me, oh, I know what you know? I'm like, well, who the fuck are you? Where's your videos? You self-proclaimed fucking genius, where's your proof? Where's your words? Wrote any books? Got any videos? Doing any lectures? No. You just got some bullshit fucking squiggle that you don't even put your own fucking name up. Who the fuck are you? Crock of shit, bag of shite. If you are the real thing, then you'll live it. And so, as far as I'm concerned, I'm the manifestation of the real thing. And I believe in explicit honesty. Truth sets you free. Just tell it the way it is. And shake people. That's my policy, and that's some psychoanalysts' policy. Jung was very much a cruel to be kind person. He would tell people what they didn't want to hear. He would leave them stricken and insecure, and would often walk out of his office crying, feeling so sorry for themselves. But what he told them was the truth. And if you take on board the truth, it will set you free. Lots of people don't want to hear it, do they? Like Jung says, the last thing anybody wants to look at is their own shadow. It's the last thing. They'll look at everything else before that. And that's why they're always out there, instead of in here. Because in here is terrifying for some.